You got to keep an open mind.
For sure.
And you cannot think that you know everything and that all your decisions, you just make your best decision with the data you have available and look at all your options, and then hopefully you made the right choice. I can't get enough of everything, whether it's stories, it's learning something from somebody else. I don't care what the subject is. I have also had a bit of a change in, I used to call myself an audiophile because I was really passionate about audio, and video, it sucked.
What's going on, everyone? It is Chris Oram here with another edition of Elevation with Chris Oram, the show where we talk to individuals who've climbed the ladder of success. And today's a very special milestone. This is episode 10 of Elevation with Chris Oram, and I have an absolutely fantastic guest. I'm very excited. So Walt Zerbe is the guest of today's podcast, and Walt is the Senior Director of Technology and Standards at Cedia, and he has a 30-year career in the overall AV and custom integration industry. So Walt is going to share a lot of great insights with us, but Walt is no stranger to the podcast world. In fact, he's the host of the Cedia podcast, in which he's run over 388 episodes, in which I've actually been a part of. So Walt put me on, actually was my very first podcast. So it's crazy to see how full circle this has gone. I reached out to Walt, said, Walt, whenever you're in Vegas, open invite to the show. Walt said, hey, I'm going to be in Vegas next week for ISC. Let's run it. So I have Walt today in the studio here at Sticky Paws in Las Vegas. And with that, I welcome Walt Zerbe to the show. Thanks for being here, Walt.
Chris, thanks a lot for having me.
Honestly, Walt, you're a great guy, great human being, great industry veteran, and I'm sure we have a lot of great insights to share with the people today. So I thank you for being here, and let's get the show on the road.
Sounds good.
All right, so 30 years in the AV industry, correct?
Yep.
All right, so you started out, I checked the year on LinkedIn today, 1988. Talk to us about your first opportunity in AV.
So actually, I'd like to start before that.
Sure, let's do it.
When I was a little kid, my dad was into hi-fi.
Okay.
And so actually, I also have a little bit of a musical background. When I first, we had a piano, and I could hear a song, and I could, play the song, fool around for a while and work the song out. So I was always, music was like a really big love for me. My dad was a hi-fi guy, so I immediately fell in love with hi-fi.
Okay.
Speakers and amps. Got a really cool Christmas gift, which was something called a Heath kit. You know what a Heath kit is?
I don't.
Yeah, I didn't think you would. That's like a my generation thing.
Yeah.
Heath kit is an electronic kit with a bunch of parts. It was a clock radio, and it's just a bunch of parts, circuit board, soldering iron, and I built that thing in like a day and a half. And I was instantly smitten with the technology side of things, with electronics. So that's where my love for this industry first started, although I had no idea this industry existed, obviously. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So you fell in love with music. You fell in love with geeking out on building things and
Yep.
putting it all together. And then what? You decided, how did you see that an AV industry career was even an option? Talk to us about that first role or college or your young life.
Yeah, so it started in high school doing AV.
Okay.
I'd set up all the stuff for auditorium for plays and all that kind of thing, and also participate in talent shows.
Okay.
With my own band or whatever I had going on. So I was like, this is great. Love to get a job in this. So eventually graduated high school and went and worked for an AV company where I had a hotel or two to take care of, setting up mics and stage podiums and things like that. And, I got really good at taping down lines, I can tell you that.
Very
I can
nice.
tape down a mean line, straight and long.
You heard it here first.
That's right. And then from there, I applied to the Baltimore Convention Center to be their audio sound coordinator. That was the person that, I was living in Baltimore at the time. That's the person that takes care of all the audio there, got the job, and continued on with audio. After that, I decided I wanted to get some more fundamental training. So I'm here to push as well that you can get education from anywhere. So I did not get a college degree, even though I did do a bunch of recording classes at Peabody Conservatory of Music, studied under Al Kefauver for a couple of years. But I went to a trade school. So I left, went to a trade school, 2 years electronics program, because I wanted to know when you adjusted a frequency on a graphic equalizer, how did electricity make that happen? I also wanted to know, how did you draw a picture on a television? So I went in there with some very fundamental questions, came out with a full understanding of it, and just kept going from there. And then moved to Pennsylvania and got into the integration side of things.
Okay, so your curiosity kind of drove you to find, like you had these questions in your mind and you wanted to find the answers.
Yeah, and I just kept finding jobs that would allow me to stay in audio and video.
Okay, so you basically followed your passion and used that into a career. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so you moved to Pennsylvania. Talk us through what it's like to start working in residential AV. Is that correct?
Yep. I first started at a company called Omni Interactive Systems. They're still around.
Okay.
They're in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. And that's where I remember a very funny challenge. So when I was being vetted to see if I was a greenie, right? They're
Yeah.
like, what makes you think you can work in this industry? So they said, well, you don't even know how to read a blueprint. And I said, well, I can draw you a schematic of anything. So I think if I know how to read a schematic, I can read a blueprint. And then the other question was, and they thought they were going to trip me up, what's the difference between a parametric equalizer and a graphic equalizer? I answered that question, and they were like, you're hired.
Nice.
So that's where I started to learn the customer service side. I was always in the customer service because working in the hotel industry and the Baltimore Convention Center,
Right.
you always had to deal with people and get the technology out of the way, just make it happen. So this was just another iteration of that, just more personalized and in the residential space. And that's where, then from there, I went on and got my own business going.
Nice.
In conjunction with a very high-end builder.
Very cool. So you had a never stop learning mindset, and you were always kind of willing to try new things, challenge yourself, learn new things. And I want to go into you owning and operating your own kind of custom integration in business.
Yeah.
Because it's very difficult, right? I've learned through trial and error, through failure, that I at one point wanted to be an owner operator of an integration firm, but I quickly realized that it is completely a team effort, and without it even being in the industry, that I was doomed for either staying small or failure. And
Yep.
It's after those learning lessons that I joined an organization with about 70 people, and still it's a team effort. So I know the struggles behind being in someone's home, running their network, the responsibility and challenges that go along with that. So I want to hear your take on that and how you got to, how you started that company.
Right. So I started the company with a builder because the builder noticed my detail for work and my customer service aspect. He was a very high-end builder. If trim wasn't straight, it was completely redone. There were no crooked studs anywhere. This was like construction
Perfection.
done as it's supposed to be done.
Okay.
Got in that. I was a one-man show, as most of us start out.
Yeah.
Then I got a second person, and then I got a third person, and we just hung at 3 people and purposely stayed at that level at about 5-6 builders. Back in that day, these were custom builders, and they didn't mark up your work. So I had, they actually had an allowance for me for pre-wiring. I hate the term pre-wiring because how can you pre-wire a wire? It's, you're wiring.
Right,
So
yeah.
even though we use the term pre-wire, it always kind of struck me funny. But they would have an allowance for pre-wiring, and then I worked out allowances with builders, and then we would go and do all the finished work directly with the homeowner.
Nice.
So I did that for quite a while until I decided I wanted to again learn something different, and I wanted to get into product management and product design because at heart I'm a product guy.
So
Love products.
you went to go work as a product manager and in the audio industry.
Correct. Well, actually, no. The very first
Not
start
actually
was.
correct.
Have you ever heard of OnCue? Again, it might be before your time.
I've heard of OnCue. I don't exactly know what OnCue is.
How about structured wiring?
No.
Okay, so structured wiring there was a company called AMP Incorporated.
Okay.
They had a smart home division, and they were going through a hostile takeover by a company, Allied Signal, I think it was, And that fell through, and Tyco, which you probably have heard of, came in through at midnight and took over AMP. At that time, they spun out a structured wiring company called OnQ.
Okay.
Actually, it was AMP Structured Wiring at the time. Structured wiring was, we were trying to convince builders you should run category cable and RG6 to every single location. It shouldn't be, your untwisted bell wire. That was a really hard sale to builders. So we were working on infrastructure. So I started out there. They used to use my homes as a lot of their show homes.
Okay.
For just to show how the work is done. Started out from that doing tech support. Created the tech support department for them, and then moved into product management. And that was infrastructure product management and audio product management.
So I want to go into your learning process. So you're throwing yourself into all of these different industries. How do you learn about structured wiring? How do you learn about the pre-wire of homes? How do you learn about all of these things? Is it on-the-job training? Are you reading books and manuals?
It's a lot of things. It's listen, study, read a bunch, and do. It's all of them. And you've heard the comments about how important it is to listen before you speak. I think that's one of the keys to learning is when you find someone that you think knows what they're doing, study them hard and really listen.
So you found yourself surrounded by good people that knew more than you, and you listened to them.
Yep. I also found myself around people that didn't know the integration world. So when I went to OnQ, I was an integrator. They weren't. They were engineers or sales and marketing people. And they think very differently. And they don't know what works for you in the field and what doesn't work for you in the field. So I combined my field expertise with their business acumen to help them build business cases to decide, here's a product that the installer's going to like, the end user will like, because you can get yourself in a lot of trouble by having a product that has too many features or not enough features or dumb features. So, and I found that part really intriguing.
So it sounds like almost you were the voice of reason between the engineers and the marketing team on the business side and the end consumer in which these products were going to be delivered to.
Yeah, or I was a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
And the engineers and the industrial designers would be like, you really need that? And I'm like, yes, we need that.
But at the end of the day, they must have found out that you were right.
Over time, yep.
And I think it is.
Now, I'm not always right. Sometimes I wasn't right. But I you got to keep an open mind.
For sure.
And you cannot think that you know everything and that all your decisions, you just make your best decision with the data you have available and look at all your options, and then hopefully you made the right choice.
So Walt's joining us from Pennsylvania, folks, and there is a great professor at the Wharton School of Business, Adam Grant, who is the author of a book, Think Again, and he encourages, do the best with the knowledge you have, but don't ever be so stuck in your way. He calls it, don't be a politician, don't be a priest that's so stuck in their way and they think I'm right, that you don't have the opportunity to think again. So you always kept an open mind and you didn't always think that you were right, even though sometimes you might have been the voice of reason.
Yes. Now, my wife might say that I think I'm always right. That's another podcast.
Yeah.
But yes, one of my goals, and it still is to try to, when you're a child, your mind's very elastic. As you become an adult, your mind becomes less elastic, especially if you go through a regimented education system where there's been a bunch of studies I've read where it's proven that your mind is less elastic after you go out of a structured education system that is based on testing for funding, the standardized testing. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, the Blue Man Group created a school in New York called the Blue School, which its main goal is to have that not happen. And they structure learning completely differently with the goal of people staying elastic when they get out of that school. So my goal has been to always look at things, if I can, like a child does. Be curious, question, and it's amazing how irritated I get when somebody comes out with a great invention and I'm irritated that I didn't think of it. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, simple ideas are hard. I'll give you a simple example. There's a product that you can put a paintbrush in that was a Shark Tank thing. that keeps your paintbrush dry. It's basically Tupperware for a paintbrush. And I use them. And I was so irritated. I'm like, why couldn't I have thought of Tupperware for a paintbrush? And the point of that story is we get so used to doing things. This is the way you do it, and therefore I will do it this way every time. It's sometimes hard to get yourself out of that rut to say, oh, there could be another way that I could do it. Like simplification, which is difficult.
For sure. And I want to call this out, but it sounds like what you're telling to me. There's this new term that's going around on the internet, and I like to call myself this term, and I think you would relate to this term, but it's the term of a synthesizer. Someone that gets knowledge from all areas of life and applies it to their own life and shares it with the world. So on the Cedia podcast, for instance, I'm sure that you synthesize knowledge from all of these different places, ideas, and people, and you synthesize it and present it as, a unique idea. And it's not about Walt only liking AV or these certain amount of things. It's Walt Zerbe is who he is because he's curious about those things. It's like, I'll make the comparison to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan likes comedy and MMA and psychedelics and marijuana. And it's Joe Rogan being interested in those things that makes him who he is. And people relate to him because they're interested also because of who Joe Rogan is and how he presents those ideas.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're a synthesizer at heart.
I think I am, and I love synthesizers. I've had analog synthesizers in the past, but yeah, I can't get enough of everything. Whether it's stories, it's learning something from somebody else. I don't care what the subject is. And I have also had a bit of a change in. I used to call myself an audiophile because I was really passionate about audio, and video. It sucked back in the day. So now video is really great.
Yeah.
And now what I've decided I'm an experience file. I like good experiences, whatever that is. Lighting, watching a movie, the suspension of disbelief, just being lost in a presentation, talking to people. This is an experience.
Right.
Hearing, sharing stories.
Right.
That's what it's all about.
Very cool. And I think, I'm 100% in agreement with you. Like, it's not about the individual products. I think I just posted this on LinkedIn the other day. It's not about the products. It's about the experience. And it doesn't have to just be, the audio video experience. You can have real life experiences. And I think real life in-world experiences are going to continue to grow and be more and more valued. Like, this podcast is great to see you face to face. It wouldn't be the same if we were doing it online.
No, it's a lot tougher online, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm really glad to have you in the studio today.
It's great to be here.
So let's talk about some of the things that you're currently working on. So for the last 7 years, you've been involved with Cedia. And for those maybe outside of the industry, can you tell us what Cedia is?
Yeah. Well, before we do that, I think I should probably finish the history.
All right, let's do it.
So, I had that integration company and then went to work for OnCue, got into audio, went to work for Russ Sound, which was a great experience. Came back. Again, worked for now Legrand, which you probably know that name.
Yep.
And that also included Nuvo. So, and the reason why I just lost my train of thought. You guys can edit all this, right?
Yeah, we can edit this, of course, Walt.
What was your question? The original question?
My question is: so you've been involved now in Cedia for 7 years.
All right, yeah.
What is
I got
Cedia?
It now. So the reason why I brought that up is the whole time that I was working at Russ Sound and working at actually OnCue, Russ Sound, and then Legrand, they allowed me to volunteer. And I volunteered for the CTA, which is a Consumer Technology Association, to be on their audio board and in their standards, ended up chairing a bunch of that stuff, and I volunteered for Cedia. And for Cedia, I was a volunteer for quite a while on something called the Technology Council.
Okay.
That's how I ended up at Cedia. There was a guy there named Dave Pedigo, and he was heading up education at Cedia, a great guy. And Dave said, hey, how would you like to come work at Cedia? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, doing what? He said, well, we want to get our standards program. Dave and I created the R10 standards group. I was on the CTA side, and Dave was on the Cedia side because it's a joint group. And after we worked together for a while on that group, he said, why don't you join Cedia? So I said, do I have to move? Sorry, anybody that lives in Indy, but he said, do you want to move to Indy? I said, no.
Yeah.
Can I work remotely? He's like, yeah. So I was one of the early, that was like 8 years ago, I started working remote full time.
That's super cool.
But that's how I ended up at Cedia, and that's how I ended up doing standards and technology.
So what is standards for someone that doesn't know?
Right. So, you know the joke about standards?
I don't.
The great thing about standards is pick which one you want to follow. There's tons of them.
Right.
So our job is trying to get people to pick ours. And we do two different things. We do standards and we do recommended practices. We do a lot more recommended practices than standards. The difference between those two things is two words: shall and should. Should is a recommended practice thing. Shall is a standards thing. And the reason why we do more recommended practices than standards is we can't, like for the immersive audio design recommended practice that we released at Expo, this past Expo, it was based around how to do immersive audio properly. We can't say, you shall place a speaker in this spot in this room every single time, no matter what, because rooms are different,
Right.
applications are different. That becomes a should, so then that's a recommended practice. So those are the differences, and what we're trying to do is these are not how-to guides. You can't pick up a recommended practice or standard, and it'll teach you how to do something. It'll show you the goals of what we're trying to do, but you still need education
Right.
in the field, in the classroom, whatever, to
Okay.
accomplish that stuff.
So have you always been in the standards at Cedia? Like that's always been kind of your assignment?
Yeah, it has been, and it still is. And I became a standards nerd when I was volunteering for the CTA.
Okay.
You know what happened at the CTA is I was involved. There's all these bucketed groups. There's the video guys, the networking guys, the audio guys, the infrastructure protocol guys. I'm like, who's looking at all this stuff together? They're like, nobody. So we said, well, we need to create a group that can do recommended practices and standards for how to install all these things. And that's why we started the group. And the CTA is a big help on that, because we have the manufacturers that we can ask questions to, the engineers. So that was the impetus of why I got involved. It's all about trying to elevate our industry. So at the end of the day, people get the experience that they're supposed to have, and we're as professional as we can be.
Right, because without these standards or best practices, I mean, it's every custom integration shop is reinventing the wheel.
Right. And you might say, which a lot of people listening will say to themselves, I've been doing this for 30 years. I already know what I'm doing. Well, you might have been doing it wrong for 30 years.
Right. You got to think again.
So keep an open mind, and why don't you take a look? Because if you take a look, I guarantee you this has happened every single time. We're doing workshops for the immersive audio design, which is, you'll hear this, the short term, which is called RP22. We're doing a workshop that's been done in the UK and India and Australia. For the first time, it's going to be done in April 16th, I think it is, in Chicago. We have very seasoned people in there, and we have very new people in there. But what we don't have is the middle people in there. And both the new and the seasoned have said, whoa, this has changed my entire thought process of how I should be doing this work. Meanwhile, they've been doing this for a long time and doing great systems. But now they said, my systems are a whole nother level of great. And because they kept an open mind. And again, this is peer reviewed done work. Anybody can be, if you're a CDA or CTA member, you can be on this panel. You can participate. 3,500 hours, 3 years. It was consensus driven about, folks, how do we figure out how to do this the best way possible? And that's exciting to do, and you learn so much.
And you're just giving so much value to the world. Like, I don't know if you have the numbers off the top of your head of how many people have looked at this recommended practice, but you're really changing the industry.
We've downloaded about 3,400 at this point in time since September. So it's the most successful, I'm going to just call it a standard because it isn't, but it's the most successful standards effort that R10 has ever done.
Right. And I think it's super important that you have geniuses behind you that in the audio world that are coming together to provide these recommended practices. And that's what the whole premise of Elevation is. It's surrounding yourself by the best and brightest minds in each different kind of field of your life. And it sounds like in terms of your deployment of this standard, you got the best and brightest in the world of audio.
You know what else we have? We have geniuses, but we also have people that are not geniuses and are new, and they're getting an education that you could never get anywhere else.
Right.
To have time to talk to the CTO and CEO of a company, you're not going to get that FaceTime. You're going to get it for 1 hour every week if you join the effort.
Right.
It's wild.
So, Walt, on that front, I know some people involved in the standards that you're talking about. So Jerry LeMay, who runs the HAA, he's been promoting, standards and teaching how to set up a best practice for immersive audio for several decades now, I believe.
Yep.
And I actually took one of Jerry LeMay's courses, the HAA, level 1, level 2, and level 3. And about a year ago exactly, he held that in Las Vegas here at the Sunset Station. And I paid a good amount of money to go learn more because I didn't know anything about immersive audio and I wanted to be better.
Yeah.
And it was a small group of people here at the Sunset Station. And I was sitting in the room preparing, getting ready for the day. And in walks in Walt Zerbe. And the smile on my face was just through the roof because I've known Walt for maybe a couple of years now. I've been a guest on the Cedia podcast, but it's really great to see a familiar face and someone who really cares about the industry.
Yeah, and I walked in the room and I was like, Chris. I mean, it was.
I remember it.
It was awesome.
It was awesome. And I want to even throw it back to my first Cedia. And I went to the keynote. I flew out to Dallas by myself, paid my own way. Shout out to Mitch Klein. He told me at CES, a CTA run event,
Mitch,
about Cedia. And I didn't know what the heck a Cedia was.
Yeah.
So I went out to Dallas on my own and I found my own way through everything that was going on. And at the keynote address, well, actually before the keynote address, on the plane ride, I was listening to the Cedia podcast, hosted by Walt Zerbe.
Really?
Yes.
You know which one it was?
I could check back. You put me on the spot. I don't know off the top of my head, but I was listening to it and I had recognized Walt. So at the keynote address, I ran up to Walt afterwards. I said, "Oh my gosh, you're Walt Zerbe, host of the Cedia podcast. Great to meet you." And Walt did something that I really appreciate, and I don't know that most people would do this. And Walt said, "Hey, you have a very unique perspective on Cedia. You have fresh eyes. You're new to the industry. We don't see people like you all the time. It's a rare opportunity that we get to talk to people that are experiencing their first Cedia. Why don't you come on the Cedia podcast?" And that was actually my first podcast. And I'd like to thank Walt because Walt put me on. Walt brought me into the industry with open arms, and he let me share my thoughts and, my overall perspective from someone who's passionate about the smart home, from a DIY perspective, and combining that knowledge into people who are professional smart home experts in custom integration. So, first of all, thank you face to face for putting me on. Like, you didn't have to do that, and I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the podcast and saying yes. Some people would say no.
No, I always say yes to everything. So I appreciate you doing that, Walt. But I met Walt, and he brought me onto the podcast, and I was able to share my vision of what the industry was. So it's crazy to see how full circle this has gone.
Has your vision changed since then, Dina?
Yes.
Yeah, I would imagine. And I was excited or interested to see how you would change as you've got experience. And I got to hand it to you too. So you also deserve props. And the reason why I'm saying this is anybody listening, go ahead and talk to somebody, reach out. I mean, you did that,
Yeah.
which is like the first step. So many people don't approach anybody. We have a really giving industry. People love to share knowledge, and we need different ways of thinking. We need fresh blood. So I want to commend you on that one too. But what has changed for you?
I mean, everything. I think really my biggest takeaway, shock, kind of opening my eyes is the amount of money that some people will pay for their smart home. Like,
yeah, going from DIY for sure. Yeah,
it's the $250,000 $250,000 up to $1 million of low voltage, when you can include things like lighting. I didn't know people had that type of money. I was looking at custom integration from my own pocketbook, and I think you can have a killer smart home for a budget price point.
Yeah.
You don't have to break the bank to have cameras and a video doorbell and an Ecobee thermostat, right? You don't have to go with these advanced control systems that cost several thousands up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think that was my biggest takeaway. I work at Eagle Century, and we deal with the top 1% in Las Vegas, and these people live in $10 million, $20 million mansions. And I thought I would have to win the lottery to ever have that. But these people, they're hard workers, they're businessmen and women, and it's really just a privilege to be able to go into someone's home and have them trust us to deploy their systems.
Yeah.
And I think that's my biggest learning lesson from where I originally met you. That's how far I've come, is to see just at the highest end what this industry is capable of.
It's also interesting to see what the low and middle end is, because that is the majority of Cedia integrators.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line is to deploy technology to improve someone's life. It's not about the tech. If you've done your job right, you've improved somebody's life. I used to ask myself, I'm not a doctor like a physician. So I deal with gadgets and trinkets, and I was like, how's that really giving back to the world? And then it clicked. When you do the job right, you're bringing people happiness. You're getting rid of some of their stress. You're transporting them to another place for a while. You're helping their kids that may have some type of disabilities, or them that have disabilities. And then you're helping people out a lot. You're energy managing, or you're doing sustainability stuff. We have so much opportunity in our industry. A lot of it is excess, but a lot of it is not. And so it's comforting to know that that's where, if you're doing your job right, that's where we're headed.
Right. I mean, we're delivering on experiences. A lot of these are not necessarily needs, but wants. I think about home theater, and shout out to one of my first friends, Haley Fonfa. She was the first person who I knew who had a home theater. Her family did. And we watched the High School Musical premiere at her home theater. And I was just so impressed that someone could have a home theater in their home, right? I was only exposed to movie theaters, and to know that people have home theaters, like, now as someone in the industry, like, I want my own home theater someday.
And you should have one.
Yes.
Many of them.
Yes. So it's really crazy just to see the perspective that we are delivering experiences to people, and that they can have really just, we can bring families together, we can bring people together for Super Bowl parties, and it's the experiences that we deliver upon.
Yep.
And you asked me a great question. It's like, what have I learned? What takeaways have I had? There's a product that I'd like to highlight, the Watt Box.
Mm-hmm.
It's $1,000 power strip. But to be able, as the integrator, to be able to control these people's outlets, to be able to power cycle their network, or power cycle Apple TV that's frozen, we save a ton of money on service calls and service visits and truck rolls. So it's a great product. I didn't know anything about it. It's definitely worth the $1,000 for the consumer to pay for that. And I just think that that's a very cool invention.
Yeah. And now we're going to be moving into the world, of course, AI is so overused, but you're going to be moving into the world of tons more sensors and personalization.
Yeah.
So it's going to get a lot more challenging for us, and there's going to be a lot more opportunities for us to do even more, which is cool.
What do you think the future is? Like, what's coming in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Gosh, that's a good question. From a perspective from our industry, I'm hoping that we can, again, improve people's lives and improve also their energy efficiency, and really cater to every member of the house. So we've, as an industry, kind of have catered to the person paying the bills. I would love to be able to cater to every member of the household uniquely, on time, at the time, no matter where they are in the space.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be pretty interesting. And that includes health stuff, disability stuff, wellness, and for sure, living in place. We will not have the real estate for everybody to be in a retirement home, nor will people have the money. So they're going to stay in their houses, and we should be managing and involved in that entire process to where someone can go through their life cycle and still be in that place. That, I think, is a good goal for the future.
And I know there's some integrators or people in technology that just focus on, senior citizens, people with disability, and there's a huge market for that, and I know it's only going to continue to grow.
Yep.
So you mentioned that, you've worked through COVID, and now we're delivering on an environment where people are working from home more often. So the internet is more and more required at home. People are spending more and more time at home. What do you think is like the next evolution of the smart home revolution? Because things like Ring and Nest really kind of changed the landscape and made it more and more involved for the lower and middle class of people to become involved in the smart home. What do you think is like the next revolution?
I think from our standpoint, the next revolution is people being able to interact with their systems on their own and have them do what they need to do on the fly. In the past and somewhat present now, someone has a request, you have to go out or remotely program that to make that happen, and it's very static. So I would say that in the future, once you get the system installed, and everything will talk to one another, different brands. We have Matter. We have it. It's not really working yet, but we have it. Things will be ubiquitous, and all things will talk to one another on whatever level. And then I think these systems will have a lot more learning capabilities to learn the users, not just do things time of day, be able to figure things out on the fly with your mood, whatever the situation might be. They'll become a lot, I hate to use the word smarter, but they'll be smarter.
You're talking about automations with AI.
Yeah, I'm talking about, back in the 50s, they would have all these sci-fi radio shows and things about the robot. It's going to improve your life. That's going to happen.
For sure.
It's going to happen in our lifetime, big time.
It's happening
5,
right
10
now.
years, it's
Yeah.
going to be solid.
All right. So, Walt, you made me smile just now. You're the first person on the show to bring up Matter. And I love Matter, and I know all about Matter. For a long, long time, that was one of my primary focuses on my YouTube channel. So could you explain for the people watching what is Matter? And you mentioned that it hasn't necessarily delivered on the promise that it was expected to when it was first announced.
Yeah. So I guess you can go on to Chris's YouTube channel and listen to everything you have to say about it. I'm going to go back to the musical instrument side of things that I was talking about. Being a keyboard guy, there was something called MIDI, which is Musical Instrument Digital Interface, that the music industry came out with. And it was a protocol that hooked any brand up to any brand, and it all worked together. It was beautiful. So no longer did I have to stay in an ecosystem of I'm a Korg guy, I'm a Roland guy, I'm a Yamaha guy. You could use them all together. So we have talked about it. Tried to happen with CE Bus quite a long time ago. You probably haven't heard of that term either. CE Bus was an effort to create a common protocol, and that's been one of our industry's main issues. You spend a lot of time figuring out how to make product A talk to product B, whether that's RS-232, it's IP, it's IR, it used to be RS-485, whatever. The whole premise behind Matter is to have a ubiquitous protocol that everything can speak, so that you can have Ring and Nest and everybody else talk to one another. The issue with it today, as with anything, is like when we had tape recorders come out, you had the VHS and beta battle. We had DVD battles. Everybody wants to control the world. So Matter exists. It works on a fundamental level. It's a little difficult to deploy right now. So that's the issue I see. That's the issue with Matter right now. All these manufacturers and great manufacturers came together to say, yeah, Matter makes sense. And I'll tell you, nobody lost any business in the music world by using MIDI. It didn't hurt anyone because everyone was afraid of, if my thing talks to their thing, then they're not going to buy my thing. It then levels out the playing field to say, well, you need to stand on your product. and your product's features and your product's capabilities. Not just because you need to buy brand X, because if you want this other thing, it's got to be my brand, but maybe that other thing isn't so great. There's another best-in-class thing that does the same thing. And as a customer, I want that one, but I can't have that one because it doesn't talk to the other one. So the whole premise of Matter is to have a language that everything can talk on. It's going to get there, but it's very political, I think, right now, which is the issue in its deployment.
And it came with the biggest companies in the world, Amazon, Google, Apple, all coming together for a unified standard. It had a big traction behind it.
Huge.
And the rollout has been kind of product category by product category. I know we're going in phases, but when you were supposed to have a Matter QR code and it just worked, I don't think it delivered on that. And
yeah,
you could point the fingers at manufacturers and all of that, but really the products that worked in all the ecosystems before are still continuing to kill it.
Yeah.
And more products are adopting Matter that work well, but it just didn't seem to deliver quite to the expectation of the public.
Yeah, I think it will. And the other important thing to note is for those companies that focus on control that are in our space, they will still exist, and their products can still be used to do the things that their products are good at doing. Matter, as I see it, is going to be a core control. We'll just use terms like play, stop, next, last, versus you really want to get into the weeds. That control system will support Matter, but it will also get into the weeds where I don't know. I think Matter will eventually get into the weeds. They're not in the weeds right now. So that's for anybody that isn't familiar with Matter and are thinking, oh gosh, all the big control systems that we use in our industry are going to go bye-byes now. Well, they are going to have to, as with any innovation, know how to compete and how to stay relevant, but they will also speak them, and they're involved in Matter.
So when I went to my first Cedia, I was surprised how many people they weren't even aware of what's going on in DIY, because I saw that no one was paying attention to DIY, and DIY is going to come in a couple of years and crush these big players in the control systems.
That wouldn't be me. I live with DIY big time for that very reason.
Yeah. And I want to talk about a certain player. They're a big player in custom integration in the control system, and they want to go the Apple strategy of having a walled garden. They want to control, I'm talking about Savant.
Yep.
Right? They want to control all aspects because they want to provide people with the best user experience. They want to control the shades and the lighting. So rather than natively supporting best-in-class products like Lutron, they want to now charge a licensing fee because they want you to use Savant lighting and Savant shades and things like that. Based on kind of what I just said, what are your thoughts on Savant's strategy by wanting to control the experience, to have a best-in-class experience, but also limiting consumers' choice at that time?
I got a answer here that covers all manufacturers. I think we have reached or are quickly reaching subscription fatigue. Everything now in someone's life, and I said this on a call that I was on with, it used to be CABA, the Continental Automated Building Systems Group, where they were discussing this, and they all seemed at the time that I said it were surprised, and they were kind of like, "Who's this guy?" I know now that I am making decisions if I can just buy a piece of hardware and it works versus I have to keep a subscription going. Sometimes I'm just buying hardware. If we keep doing that with every single thing in your life, something's got to give. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe that subscription model, maybe for some things it'll exist, but I think the subscription model is going to be a bit of a impedance to that.
Do you see it as a money grab or a point of greed?
I don't love it, but I do know a company needs to make money. I mean, a business needs to be solvent. They need to have a business plan and a business model. Whatever they deem is the right one for them is the right one for them. So I guess we'll see what happens. But I have heard, though, just on the flip side, that I know that Amazon is losing big time on Alexa, and they are thinking about potentially charging for voice control because they thought everybody was going to order everything by voice. Hey, get me a roll of paper towels. They didn't know that people were going to ask stupid questions, which I do all the time, just to see what answer I get.
Yeah.
As well as, give me the weather or control my Philips Hue light bulbs. They weren't planning for that to be the main use case. That's the main use case. So even though DIY right now, that's free, that might not be free moving forward.
Yeah. So in my house, I had an Amazon device, and at some point I switched over to Apple HomeKit. So that's how I run my cameras, my lights, everything in my smart home can all be controlled via Apple HomeKit. And I'm what you call an advanced user in Apple HomeKit. I have something called a Hoobs, where I'm able to hack the Apple HomeKit ecosystem and bring in outside players that Apple's not natively supporting.
You have to teach me about this Hubes.
It's super cool. So I can bring in like my Eufy doorbell, for instance, which isn't natively supported within HomeKit. And really, I can just bring in just about any device you could ever want. And that's really how I got my start in the smart home industry, is because I wanted to be a power user, and I suffered from products not working together. The word interoperability is the term in the industry, and I wanted to solve that.
Yep.
And I did make it happen.
Why did you switch to home? What was your impetus to do that?
Because Amazon was listening to me. Amazon was trying to sell me products. Amazon didn't have my best interest in mind.
Yep. Okay.
And I stand by that. And,
maybe I'll do the same. I would like to try that.
And I'm all in on iPhone. So if I'm able to talk to the Apple voice assistant and control different aspects of my home, I'll definitely do that, because I'm in the Apple walled garden. I'm not in other walled gardens.
Do you know a guy named Michael Heiss?
No.
Well, he's a guy that's been in the industry for a long time, and he's long accused me of being an Apple fanboy, because he is not an Apple guy. I have not been real happy with Siri. I think, they started the whole voice thing.
Yeah.
And then, like many things Apple has done, they started it, like iTunes is still a mess.
Yeah.
They started the audio revolution with the MP3 player and
Right.
iTunes, and Siri was the first one. It was amazing, but then I feel like they've been leapfrogged by Google and by Amazon. So are you finding that the HomeKit is working pretty reliably?
HomeKit is great. They continue to build upon HomeKit. Siri is not great.
But Siri's the interface, though, right? For you to do it.
So it's the Apple Home app. So Siri is the voice
you're pushing
assistant.
buttons.
I'm pushing buttons,
All right.
but I'm also having
pseudo-buttons.
I'm also having automation. So
Okay, gotcha.
when I talk about the smart home,
So that's a good question for you. Are you big voice control, or do you prefer going back to tactile controls? Because that's something I think our industry will be moving to as well. You asked me about the future.
Yeah.
Well, eventually we'll just think it and it'll happen, right, with BCI and all this business. But I think apps and flat and screens that don't give you any physical feedback, that's gone.
So I think the smart home has 3 areas of control. So I use a light switch as my favorite example. You can turn on and off the light switch, the physical touch. You can do voice commands, hey, turn on the light. Or you can use your phone control, so you can do it anywhere from the world. And I have a lot of automations in my home. My favorite smart home products are buttons. So there's manufacturers like Eve, Akara, and Flick, where
Flick, yeah.
I love Flick.
I saw them at CES. That's where I first learned about them.
So, Walt, my video coming out on the YouTube channel on Sunday is about the Flick buttons, my favorite smart home accessory. Super high quality, Swedish product, literally the best tactile buttons you can have. And I can turn off my entire house by pushing a button once. And that is so cool. That's a big
amazing.
flex.
And I can tell you, as a product guy, finding that exact how good does that feel is really hard. Tons of springs, tons of plastic, I appreciate that when a product gives you a positive thing that you pressed it and it felt like you had a positive a push that I pressed that thing. That's why I really don't love apps and iPads. You don't get even though it might have haptic touch, it's still not the same.
Yeah. I want to talk, so on that front, we talk about high quality products. Let's talk about cheaply made products that are being imported from places like China. And there's a market for cheap smart homes as well.
Yeah. I don't want to equate cheap with I would say cheap as low cost.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think at least from our industry, I wouldn't want cheap to mean poor quality user experience.
Yeah.
And or, this is the real challenge, threat with security, because these chips or the boards that are using the product may be compromised, and could be a potential for your network having issues, cyber attacks, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so you probably don't want to cheap out on something like your network. I know a big one is cameras.
No, you can't do that. My advice is buying from known manufacturers that, and here's the other thing, will the product be around?
Right.
That's the one. There's so many cool new things to try, but do you want to deploy that cool new thing in a customer's house? Mm-hmm. Well, you want to live with it yourself.
Yeah.
And then you want to see, do I think the company's still going to be around? That's, to me, one of our biggest challenges. Is there are great products and great ideas coming out, but are they going to remain for 5-10 years?
Yeah, and some companies just, they go out of business, they kill off the products, and it doesn't work anymore.
And now you got a customer, and now the product doesn't work. It needs a firmware update because it broke. And they're like, well, we have to replace all of it with something else.
Right, and that's not an easy sell. That would piss off a customer.
Another good reason for Matter. If you can find another product that has similar specifications and features, and then all of a sudden, hey, great, we can just use Matter products to support. That will help us in the long-term maintenance with other choices.
Sure, and I'm of the mindset I would rather pay a premium to get products like Philips Hue or Lutron that I've never had a problem with any of those products.
Yeah, our industry cannot go cheap quality and be maybe putting in dangerous products that have some malicious intent in them. We have to go what you're saying with, but maybe you put in less and they can expand later. Mm-hmm. But yeah, high quality products.
It's great you touch on that point, because I tell everyone that the smart home is a journey. So you don't have to buy everything all at once. You can buy and add and add and add. And that's kind of the fun of it. It's like, it's never complete, which to some people may be upsetting, but I find the journey is so much fun to add. Let me buy a new robot vacuum that'll come into my system. Let me buy flick buttons that will come into my system and really add value to my life.
Yep, totally agree.
And that's what the smart home's all about. So I want to hear from you and see what are some of your favorite smart home products. What's really adding value into your life?
Oh gosh. I haven't really messed with a bunch of new ones. Flick is one that I want to mess with. I've been really engaged recently in the audio and video experience and maximizing proper design for immersive audio and for video. Because we're working on these recommended practices, I'm really, I like to live what we do.
Yeah.
So all my time's been going on really understanding the science of how audio moves in a room, just like we did with HAA as kind of a simple thing, placement of seats, null points of things, but room construction, and getting more involved in the details of a product. So is this the right product to do what I want it to do in this particular space? That's where I've been spending all my time.
Yeah, so you're really kind of testing what you're learning and bringing
100%.
it back to your house and making it better. 100%.
It's an opportunity. When we do an effort that we're learning, I want to be doing it. So that's I only have so much time. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm doing.
One of the funny things I find about our industry and in home theater especially is that you can always get a better product. So the speakers that you start with today, you can always get a better one tomorrow, and then a better one the next time, and a better one the next time. And it's just a lot of fun. It's like a kid in a candy shop that you can always be adding to your setup to make it better.
Yeah, but there is a point where you get this much better for that much more money. And I will also say, if you follow the recommended practices and the standards, you'll be surprised. You can get an incredible experience without spending a lot of money, but just knowing how to put the right product in the right place for the right application. Mm-hmm. That is And sometimes if you just say, I'm just going to get better speakers, that might not change anything.
Right.
And it could even make it worse if you don't really understand what the speaker's doing in the space.
And there's such just a broad spectrum of people that listen to music and watch television and movies and like that. So
COVID helped us with that.
Yeah.
For sure.
So on one end, there's people who are happy with their $25 Bluetooth speaker. That's good enough for me. And then there's people who spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on their Sonos Faber Macintosh setup, and the spectrum is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
You can spend a lot of money on home theater.
Heck yeah.
We know a lot of people that spend money on home theater. We know a lot of these manufacturers that have these very expensive products. I have been in some great demos at Cedia. For instance, last year, did you get a chance to go to the L Acoustics booth?
Yes.
I cried.
Did you?
It was beautiful, Walt.
Yeah. Yeah, I went to their booth at ISC as well. Yeah, again, not the greatest place to get a demo, trade show, because there's a lot of noise floor. But yeah, there's some great things going on there, and there's a lot of support for the recommended practices we're coming out with, where the manufacturers are now even saying this system has been this demo system has been done to a level 1 or level 2
Right.
RP22, which is really, really cool to see the industry starting to come together.
Yeah, because we all have similar intentions in mind. We want to deliver great experiences via these products. So I think what you're doing obviously is bringing the industry together. You're bringing the world together and making it a better place. So that is your value to the world. And
yeah, my value is to get rid of my great and your great, but have a great. And you can still put your spin on it. I mean, this is just the performance side of it. The whole rest of the room, the furnishings and, the workmanship, that's all you. But just to have here's your target. And what that target does is it says to the customer, I'm going to deliver this. The customer says, I know what I'm buying. And then the manufacturer says, oh, I know my product is going to really shine. I can't tell you how many people's houses I've been in where somebody put a good product in a bad use case, and they're like, this product's awful. And I'm like, actually, it's not an awful product.
Yeah.
It's just been misused.
Everyone has to do their part is what you're saying.
All I'm asking is keep an open mind, which is the tagline for our podcast, and learn. Just soak it up.
All right. That's absolutely wonderful, Walt. So I want to change the speed of the topics a little bit, and I want to jump into what you're doing this week. So you're in town for a convention. You're in my homeland of Las Vegas. You're here for ISC 2024.
Yep.
Talk to us about it.
So I haven't been to ISC show in quite a long time. I used to go when I was with Legrand because we were in that industry. I went to learn. I'm here for 2 days, taking about 5-6 classes a day. So I'm hoping I'm going to have a very limited amount of time on the show floor. My whole take is to see what the security industry is saying, what they're saying about cybersecurity, what they're saying about AI, what they're saying about automation and integration, about sensors, about access control. So I've picked a bunch of classes to hear from those people, and also to potentially pilfer some of those subject matter experts to come into our industry to talk to us as well. It is interesting. They call themselves integrators, which surprised me, but a security, like just full on, that's all we do is security and access control. They're integrators. So we also call ourselves integrators, but we integrate no more systems. That's the whole point for being here, is to learn. And I've learned a bunch of things already. But more importantly, after the talks, I've gone up to meet the people, gotten their cards, and it's to be continued.
Let's go, Walt.
That's where the learning's really gonna go.
Yeah, it's honestly, if you introduce yourself to one person, that one person can change your life, and they can introduce you to the next person. And the world we live in with social media and LinkedIn and things like that, you're able to keep in touch with people and learn more. And it sounds like you're doing what I did at Cedia and continue to do. I'm
totally you this week.
I love it, Walt. And because you come in with a mindset, like I was never afraid to walk into rooms where
you are not.
Right. I walked into a room at Cedia with Jerry LeMay and Adam Pels about immersive audio, and I'll just say it flat out. I was the dumbest person in the room when it comes to that.
You were the newbie.
I was the newbie. I didn't know what they were talking about,
Don't
and
say
I loved
dumbest.
it.
You were the most, and I use the term ignorant all the time. I'm ignorant about a bunch of stuff. You just were unaware. Didn't
Right.
know.
But the first step is learning what I didn't know, and going to that room, I loved it, and I introduced myself to Jerry and Adam, and really, they are the best and the brightest in their field.
Yep.
So to be able to even get a nugget of their knowledge, like what you're doing for access control and alarms at ISC this week,
Yep.
it's how you get the ball rolling. It's how you become from newbie to beginner to intermediate, proficient, advanced.
Yeah. And they treated you like everybody else. You know, really seasoned people were in there. You know, Atlanta Home Theater, a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
And then we whipped out the mics and did a podcast.
Yeah.
Which was great.
So-
Which you all can hear. It's on the Cedia podcast. There is a HAA podcast where you can actually hear Chris and hear his thoughts after he went through that class.
It was dope.
It was dope.
So I want to talk about, you're at ISC this week. My neighbor had something terrible happen about a week ago. He had his truck stolen. And it hits you when you feel violated in your home. And that's why I think the alarm and security industry shines, is because it can help prevent these types of things. It can help find out the people that did this type of a thing. And I didn't have outdoor surveillance cameras, but that day I ordered some
Same thing happened to me. Now I've got cameras everywhere.
because, you know, I should have done it years ago, but it was that event that I said, I can't live my life vulnerable anymore.
Yeah, the security industry, their biggest play is peace of mind. That's kind of a wellness aspect. I want to ask a question. Was the vehicle locked or unlocked?
I'm not sure. I don't have a ton of detail, but just to know that.
I just make that simile because with networks, a lot of times accidents happen because we didn't do a good job
Right.
of changing passwords, putting in tough passwords. We just invited the trouble to come.
And it's only in hindsight that we can see these vulnerabilities that we left ourselves open to put it frankly. And it's about taking proactive action rather than retroactive action. So
Yeah.
I feel terrible because my neighbor is a good man, right? He is a good, hardworking man. And to have him come to our door and say, hey, did you see anything? Like, broke my heart. It ruined my day. And I don't want that to happen to anyone else. So when I, as a custom integrator, work in both audio, video, and security, there is a drive in me to provide these solutions to people and give them peace of mind and protection in their home.
Absolutely.
We have a tremendous responsibility to people to provide good quality solutions. And I think that's why I'm in custom integration, is because I need to deliver upon that. And I want to give smart homes to as many people as possible. And I think really that's my life vision.
Love it.
And I come from a unique perspective because I wanted to be in the smart home industry and I didn't know how to pave my way through it. So I went to CES. That was my first step into the industry. And then,
Overwhelming.
yeah,
It's a crazy show.
Yeah. And I mean, now that they have their own little smart home section,
Yep.
and I really thank Mitch Klein for introducing me to Cedia. If it wasn't for Mitch Klein, I wouldn't have met Walt.
Mitch
I
is
wouldn't,
awesome.
I wouldn't have met a tremendous amount of people that are involved in Cedia. I wouldn't have gotten my job at Eagle Century in custom integration. I wouldn't be where I am today without,
Network.
yeah. And I think that's what I want to wrap on that note. It's say hello to one person. Even if you have to go out of your way, say the hello and really do it genuinely. And you can always explore opportunities and future possibilities, but you can't go in with I want to take. Like,
No.
you just have to meet these people and learn about them. I think creating these relationships is super crucial. I'm grateful of this relationship. I'm
Yeah,
grateful
me
that
too.
you came to be on my show. It's a dream come true.
Well, thank you, Chris. My only other two things to add to that is be optimistic and have a good attitude. Attitude will take you a long way.
For sure. So on that note, Walt, I thank you for being on the show.
Chris, thank you.
Big milestone today, episode 10 of Elevation with Chris Oram, where we talk to individuals who climb the ladder of success. I really loved today's show with Walt Zerbe on it, and I wish Walt a great ISC. He's always welcome back on the show. And with that, folks, we'll wrap episode 10. Thanks for watching.